Hello Reddit. My name's Claire Peterson. I'm 24 now, but this whole mess started when I was 19, broke, hopeful, and maybe just a little too trusting. Back then I thought my mom, Valerie, was my biggest cheerleader. She always told everyone how proud she was that her baby girl had a plan. I used to smile when she bragged about me at family BBQs. Claire's got her head screwed on straight, she'd say, patting my back while I awkwardly clutched a paper plate stacked with ribs and potato salad. My dad, Keith, was quieter about it. He'd just nod at me across the dinner table, sometimes dropping a 20 in my hand when I headed out for my waitressing shifts at the Copper Mug. Emergency gas money, he'd mutter. He worked long hours as a mechanic, so did Mom. She ran the front desk at a dental clinic. We weren't rich, but we weren't desperate either. I was determined not to be the kid who stuck around forever. I wanted my own place. A tiny studio with squeaky floors, maybe a patch of mildew in the bathroom, didn't matter. It'd be mine. I started saving my first semester in community college. I did Gen Eds while pulling double shifts, barista at 6 a.m., waitress by evening. I learned how to fake a cheerful grin when my feet hurt so bad I wanted to scream. Every tip, every crumpled dollar went into a battered old shoebox under my bed. Later, I opened a separate savings account at First Horizon Bank and deposited everything I could. It wasn't glamorous. I skipped parties. I stopped buying fancy coffees. My friends, well, the ones I had left, thought I was boring as hell. I didn't care. I had a goal. By 24, I'd sign for my own studio apartment in Springdale, maybe even a tiny balcony if the stars aligned. Mom was my biggest confidant through it all. When I'd get home late, she'd be waiting in the kitchen, sipping chamomile tea and scrolling on her iPad. She'd ask how much I'd made that day. Sometimes she'd pinch my cheek like I was still 10. "I'm so proud of you, Claire Bear," she'd say, voice thick with something I thought was love. She even bragged about my account balance to her sister, my Aunt Lynn. I'd overhear them on the phone. "Claire's up to 12 grand. She'll be at 25 by next Christmas." I used to puff up with pride hearing her talk about me like that. Like I was doing something big. Something no one in our family had done alone before. Around my 22nd birthday, I hit 30 grand. By then I was juggling 2 jobs and side gigs, dog walking, babysitting, selling clothes online. Dad would joke that he barely saw me. Mom would wink and say I was on the grind. My coworkers teased me about never splurging on myself. I always answered it'll be worth it when I'm turning the key to my own front door. I even started touring listings online. I'd lie awake at night scrolling Zillow, screenshotting shabby studios with linoleum floors and tiny galley kitchens. I could practically feel the cheap cabinet handles under my fingers. Then one night when I was about to turn 23, Mom sat me down. It was late. Dad was already asleep. She made us hot cocoa, the fancy kind with those tiny marshmallows she always said were for special occasions. "Claire Bear," she started, folding her hands on the table, "you know I love you, right?" I nodded, licking cocoa from my lip. "Of course." She hesitated, eyes darting to the hallway like she was checking for Dad's ghost. "I've been thinking about the taxes you'll pay when you close on the condo. It's a lot for a young person. It's a scam, honestly. They'll bleed you dry." I frowned. "Yeah, but it's just part of it, right?" She leaned closer. "Not if you're smart. Listen, if we put the deed in my name, we can claim some exemptions. Family residence, caretaker status, we can even adjust it under my pension bracket to reduce what you owe. You'll save thousands, baby." I stared at her. The thought made me uneasy. "But it's my money." She laughed. "Oh, honey, of course. It's still yours. I'm your mother. You think I'd keep it? I just want to make sure the government doesn't take more than they should. Once it's in my name, we'll transfer it back whenever you want. I'm just the paperwork middleman." It sounded shady. But Mom had always handled the bills, the taxes, even Dad's paycheck stubs. I was 19 when I started saving. I'd never filed taxes alone. I didn't know what capital gains even meant. If Mom said there was a loophole, why wouldn't I believe her? I agreed. I hugged her so tight that night, my cocoa went cold on the table. I remember whispering, "Thank you for looking out for me." She kissed my forehead. "Of course, baby. That's what moms are for." 2 months later, my offer on a tiny studio downtown got accepted. $75,000, cheap by any standard, but it was everything to me. I drained my savings, every penny of it, and signed everything over to Mom's name for tax purposes. We celebrated with takeout pizza. Dad didn't ask questions, he just said he was proud I'd made it happen. I fell asleep that night picturing my new life. My own keys. My own front door. No more tiptoeing when I got home at 2 a.m. after closing shifts. If only I'd known. I got the keys to the studio on a warm Thursday in June. It was raining that day, one of those weird sudden downpours that soaks your shoes the second you step off the bus. I didn't care. I stood there on the cracked sidewalk, water dripping from my hair, staring at the faded red door of apartment 2B. Mine? Well, supposedly mine. Mom came with me, of course. She held the keys between her thumb and forefinger like they were fragile. She was grinning ear to ear, snapping photos of me unlocking the door for the first time. She even made me pose in the empty living room, if you could call it that. It was really just an awkward square big enough for a futon, a TV stand, and a lamp I found at Goodwill. We sat on the dusty hardwood floor eating gas station sandwiches. Mom kept saying how proud she was, how this would be the first step to bigger and better. She talked about painting the walls, maybe adding some plants. I nodded along, but her excitement felt off, like it wasn't really about me. But I brushed that thought away. This was supposed to be the happiest day of my life so far. I spent that first night curled up on a sleeping bag in the middle of the room. I didn't even have a mattress yet. I kept the front door unlocked until midnight so Dad could swing by after his shift and see it too. He stood in the doorway, his work boots squeaking on the wet floor, looking tired but trying to smile. "You did good, kiddo," he said. He handed me a dusty box fan from the garage, my first piece of furniture. I slept with the fan blasting on high, rattling like it was about to come apart. I didn't mind the noise. It was the sound of freedom. The next few weeks were a blur of moving boxes, thrift store furniture, and late nights sitting cross-legged on the floor eating microwave noodles. Mom dropped by almost every other day. She'd bring leftover casserole, fuss about my dishes piling up, and remind me to forward the HOA fees to her since the deed was in her name. "Just Venmo me every month," she said. "I'll handle the boring forms." It was fine. For a while. By the time fall came around, I was settled in. I made friends with my next-door neighbor, a sweet older lady named Dolores who always smelled like vanilla candles and gave me stale cookies she accidentally overbaked. I bought a second-hand couch. I started feeling grown up. Like the sacrifices, the skipped concerts, the double shifts, the sleepless nights were paying off. Mom was still hovering, though. Sometimes I'd come home and she'd be inside, wiping down my counters or reorganizing my pantry. I'd laugh it off. "You don't, huh?" She'd wave me off. "I just want you living nicely. I don't mind. You're my baby girl." It was around November when things started to feel off. One night I came home late from work and found Mom sitting on my couch, shoes off, watching TV like it was her pee. "Hey, Claire Bear," she chirped when I walked in, like I was the guest. I laughed, but it sat weird in my stomach. Hi. You've been here long." She shrugged. "A few hours. Hope you don't mind. I needed some peace and quiet from your father's snoring." I remember standing there, dripping cold November rain all over the welcome mat I bought at Dollar General, thinking it's not your place. But I didn't say it. I just grabbed a fork and ate what was left in the pan. December rolled in with its fake cheer and twinkly lights. I spent Christmas Eve at the studio alone. Dad was working overtime, and Mom claimed she needed a night to herself. I watched old sitcoms on my tiny TV, sipping hot chocolate and telling myself next year would be better. Then came January, cold, gray heavy. I got my W-2s in the mail. It hit me I'd never really figured out how this tax loophole Mom had talked about actually worked. So one Sunday I brought it up. We were in her kitchen, standing by the sink. She was peeling potatoes. I asked, "Hey Mom, when do we switch the deed over to me?" She didn't look at me. Just kept peeling. "We will, honey. It's complicated. Not right now. You don't want to trigger extra fees. Trust me." I pressed her. She got sharp. "Claire, I know what I'm doing. Drop it." I dropped it sort of. But the pit in my stomach wouldn't leave. Late one night in February, I came home from work to find an envelope taped to my studio door. Inside was a letter, an official-looking notice. I skimmed it 3 times before I understood. My apartment, my studio, was being listed for sale. I called Mom in a blind panic. She didn't answer. I called again. And again. Finally, around midnight, she picked up. "Mom? What the hell is this?" I was shaking so hard the paper crinkled in my fist. She sighed. "Claire Bear, calm down. We'll talk tomorrow." "No, talk now. Why is my apartment for sale?" There was silence on the other end. Then flatly she said, "Because I need the money, Claire. I'm retiring soon. It's my name on the deed, remember?" My mind went blank. I tried to argue, to yell, but she'd already hung up. I sank to the floor in that tiny hallway, my key still clutched in my hand, listening to my neighbor's TV through the wall. The fan Dad gave me word behind the door I no longer owned. I realized in that moment what everyone always says, but you never believe until it's too late. Sometimes the people you trust most can rob you blind, and they'll sleep just fine after. I didn't sleep that night. I sat on the cold floor of my studio, back against the door, staring at the letter over and over until the words blurred into meaningless ink. Outside my window, Springdale's winter wind rattled the glass like a warning. Somewhere downstairs, Dolores' TV droned on, muffled sitcom laughter I used to find comforting. Now it made me feel like I was underwater, hearing life happening but unable to reach it. I called Mom again. Straight to voicemail. I texted, "You can't do this. Please don't do this. Mom, please, I'll pay you rent. I'll pay you anything." No reply. By morning, the pit in my stomach had grown teeth. I didn't even change out of my work clothes from the night before, just pulled on my coat and walked the 4 miles to my parents' house. I could have taken the bus, but I needed the cold air, needed to feel something that wasn't panic. Dad answered the door. He was still in his Navy mechanic coveralls, his hair sticking up like he'd just rolled out of bed. "Claire." He looked confused, eyes flicking to my red hands clutching the letter. "Is Mom here?" I pushed past him into the kitchen. The TV was on low. She was sitting at the table, flipping through the Sunday coupons, a mug of chamomile steaming by her elbow. She didn't even flinch when she saw me. Just looked up like I was asking what was for breakfast. "Claire Bear, you look pale." I dropped the letter in front of her. It skidded across the table, knocking over a salt shaker. "You're selling it?" She sighed this long, performative exhale like I was the one being unreasonable. "Claire, sit down." "No." I could feel my voice rising, but I didn't care. Dad hovered in the doorway, arms crossed, not saying a word. "That's my apartment. I paid for it. Every penny. You promised." "I did not promise," she cut in, cool as a cucumber. "I said we'd see about transferring it later. Things changed, Claire. I didn't know I'd be looking at early retirement. Or that your father's hours would get cut." Dad flinched at that but said nothing. I could feel my pulse in my ears. "So you're just taking it? Just like that?" She tilted her head, a pitying smile I suddenly hated. "I'm not taking anything. It's my property legally. And you're young, you've got time to save again. I need this more than you do right now." I laughed. It came out cracked like glass under a boot. "You think I can just do it all over again? 5 years of saving? Double shifts? Living off leftover staff meals and instant noodles? Do you have any idea?" "Lower your voice," she snapped. "We don't need the neighbors hearing this family drama." Family drama. That's what she called it. Dad cleared his throat. "Valerie, maybe we should, stay out of it, Keith." She snapped at him so sharply I flinched. I looked at him, my dad, the man who used to slip me 20s when I'd run out of gas money, who taught me how to change my oil in the driveway. He didn't meet my eyes. He just stared at the floor tile like it had the answers. I realized then that no one was going to step in for me. There was no magic fix, no last-minute rescue. My mother had sold my future for her, peace of mind, and my father, my quiet, sweet father, was going to let her. I didn't bother arguing anymore. What was the point? She held the papers. She held the keys. When I got back to the studio that night, it didn't feel like mine anymore. Every corner I'd scrubbed clean, every scratch on the floor I'd learned to ignore, it all looked foreign now. Like it had never belonged to me. Maybe it never did. I packed a duffel bag with the essentials. My uniforms, my toothbrush, a couple of t-shirts, the battered old shoebox I'd first kept my tips in, empty now but still mine in a way nothing else was. I didn't take the couch. I didn't take the fan Dad gave me. Let her have it all. I left the keys on the counter. Locked the door one last time. Dolores poked her head out as I passed her door. "You okay, honey?" I wanted to explain. To unload everything onto this kind woman who'd once given me stale snickerdoodles and called me kiddo. But what would I even say? My mom stole my life out from under me? I just forced a smile. "Yeah. Moving on up, you know?" She nodded, that same gentle warmth in her eyes. "Good luck, sweetheart." I didn't go back home. I didn't call Mom again. I didn't answer her messages when she texted 2 weeks later. "Hope you're not mad at me forever, Claire Bear. You know I did what I had to do. Love you. Love you." Right. I found a month-to-month rental above a bar downtown. The ceiling leaks when it rains. The heater wheezes like it has asthma. I'm sleeping on an air mattress until I can afford better. But at least the name on the lease is mine, just mine, and no one's coming to tape another letter to the door. Sometimes when I'm clocking out at 2 a.m., I wonder if she ever thinks about me while she's sipping her tea in the apartment I paid for. I wonder if she falls asleep easy in that fresh new condo she bought with the money from my dreams. I don't know. I don't ask. I just keep saving again. One crumpled tip at a time. That first month in the tiny apartment above the bar felt like the longest winter of my life. I'd come home after late shifts smelling like beer and fryer oil, tiptoe up the rickety stairs behind the bar's back exit, and pray the lock wouldn't jam again. The landlord, Mr. Donnelly, a gruff old man with nicotine-stained fingers, hadn't fixed much of anything in decades. But he didn't ask questions and he didn't want references. That was good enough for me. I remember the sound of the pipes rattling behind the peeling bathroom wall. The draft that crept in through the single cracked window over my air mattress. The way my breath hung in the air some nights because the radiator barely did its job. But it was mine. No key waiting to be taken back. No signatures with invisible strings. Just my name, cheap rent, and a ceiling that leaked when it felt like it. I stopped talking to Mom completely. She still called sometimes, especially late, voicemails that started sweet, then edged into scolding when I didn't pick up. Claire Bear, you're acting childish. Or you can't just cut me out, I'm still your mother. Sometimes I'd listen to half of it just to see if there was an apology hidden somewhere. There never was. Dad texted me once 2 weeks after I left. It was simple, you okay, kiddo? I didn't reply. He didn't follow up. By February, I was pulling triple shifts again. Mornings at a bakery on Maple, evenings at a bistro on the east side, late nights still bartending Fridays and Saturdays. I was 24 but felt 50 when I climbed those stairs at 3 a.m., peeling off my uniform in the dark. I started a new shoebox. Same spot, under my bed, which was now a deflating air mattress wedged between piles of laundry and half-packed boxes I couldn't bring myself to unpack all the way. I didn't trust permanence anymore. But that shoebox, that felt like a promise. $1 bills, a handful of coins, the same slow drip that had built my first dream. I tried not to think about where the money went last time. About how Mom probably spent it on a new fridge and a fancy couch she'd wanted for years. About the balcony she'd always dreamed of, the one I used to picture myself having. It made me sick if I thought too long about it. So I didn't. Not when there were double espressos to pull and dirty glasses to scrub. One night in March after my second shift, I was closing up the bistro when I met Jenna. She was a line cook there, a little older than me, bright red hair pulled back in a messy bun, arms covered in tiny burns and tattoos she'd done herself in someone's basement. She caught me counting tips at the back table near the dish pit, eyes puffy because I'd just spent the last hour trying not to break down in the walk-in. She plopped down across from me without asking, pulled a flask from her apron, and offered me a sip. I'd never really drunk much, but that night I took it gladly. It tasted like cheap whiskey and burning regrets. We ended up talking for an hour after closing about crap parents, about how family will always tell you you're selfish when you finally stop letting them walk over you. She told me about her own mess, an ex who maxed out her credit cards, a dad she hadn't spoken to since she was 16. I told her everything. All of it, the 5 years saving, the paperwork lie, the taped envelope on the door. Jenna didn't give me pity. Didn't say I'm so sorry. She just snorted, took another pull from her flask and said, damn. Well, that's messed up. But you're still here, huh? Still working. You'll get it all back. I wanted to believe her so bad it made my chest hurt. It's gonna take forever. She shrugged. So what? You've done it once. You'll do it again. Only this time you won't sign it over to anyone but yourself. I laughed, really laughed, for the first time since it all blew up. Yeah. You're right. Damn right, I'm right, she said. Next time your mom calls, block her. Next time she comes knocking, change your locks. That was the night the fog in my head started to lift. I didn't forgive Mom. I didn't forgive Dad. But I did something better. I stopped waiting for them to do the right thing. I stopped hoping for an apology that'd never come. Jenna and I started hanging out after shifts. Some nights she'd crash at my place on the air mattress beside mine when her roommate situation got too toxic. We'd drink corner store wine and make lists of what we'd buy when we hit it big: an actual mattress, a car that didn't squeal when you turned left, an apartment with heat that worked. No castles in the sky. Just small, stubborn dreams. One Sunday morning, we sat on the fire escape behind the bar, sipping burnt coffee, watching the sunrise over Springdale's cracked rooftops. Jenna nudged me and asked, so what's next? You gonna save for another studio? Or something bigger? I stared out at the gray sky turning pink at the edges and felt something shift in my chest. Not quite hope, not quite anger, but something stronger than both. Bigger, I said. Next time, it'll be bigger. And no one's gonna touch it but me. I knew it wouldn't be quick. I knew it wouldn't be easy. But for the first time since I'd handed my mother those papers, I felt like maybe, just maybe, the game wasn't over yet. By April, the air mattress finally gave out. One minute I was sleeping, the next I was half on the floor, my hip digging into the cold, splintery floorboards. Jenna woke up on her side, stared at me with one eye open, and snorted so hard she nearly choked on her own laugh. Guess it's time for the next step, huh? She mumbled, voice scratchy from cheap wine and bad sleep. I flipped her off, but she was right. The shoebox under the bed had about $600 in it. Not enough for a new lease. Not even close. But enough for a second-hand futon I found on Marketplace, dragged up the narrow bar stairs with Jenna swearing under her breath the whole time. We celebrated that sad little futon like it was a palace bed. We toasted with gas station cupcakes and a single candle we stuck in a stale donut. She asked what I'd name it, the futon. I said hope. She thought it was hilarious. Work didn't slow down. If anything, it doubled. I picked up Saturday morning shifts at the bakery when one of the regulars, an old man named Marvin, slipped on a wet floor and broke his wrist. So instead of dragging myself to bed at 3 a.m., I'd catch 2 hours on hope, slam 3 cups of stale diner coffee, and head back out the door by 5:30. Sometimes I didn't even bother changing my shirt. But there was something satisfying about the grind this time. It felt like armor. Like every dollar was a brick I was stacking between me and my mother's voice in my head. Speaking of her voice, it never really went away. Every week or so I'd see it on my phone. Sometimes she left voicemails, half sweet, half poison. Claire Bear, please pick up. I hate that we're like this. Or, don't punish me forever. I'm still your mother. And once a text that just read, don't tell people I stole from you. It's more complicated than that. That one nearly made me throw my phone across the futon. But I didn't. I just deleted it and blocked the number. Then she'd call from Dad's phone. Then a new random number. I blocked them all. Dad never called on his own. Once in a while I'd get a blank text from his number. Maybe an accident, maybe him trying to reach out without picking sides. I never answered. He made his choice when he turned his eyes to the floor in that kitchen. He could live with it. Summer rolled in hot and sticky. Jenna got a second job too, back of house at a diner off the highway. We'd pass each other like ghosts, sometimes only seeing each other for 10 minutes at a time. She'd stumble in while I stumbled out. We'd high-five over the futon, promise to find a minute to breathe next week, maybe. She kept me sane. When I wanted to break things, she'd pull me out to the fire escape with a 6-pack of something cheap and fizzy and tell me stories about her idiot exes and the time she'd couch-surfed in worse places. Compared to living with Chuck and his pet ferrets, she'd say, this is a goddamn resort. One muggy July night, I sat on that fire escape alone, flipping through an old notebook where I'd been scribbling numbers and listings. I'd run the math 100 times. If I kept up the triple shifts, I could scrape enough for a down payment again. Not for a studio this time, but a 1-bedroom. Maybe even a tiny fixer-upper house in the rough part of town. Somewhere nobody could touch but me. It would take 3 years. Maybe 4. And I'd have to stay lucky. No broken ankles, no lost jobs, no surprise hospital bills. But it was a plan. My plan. And this time there'd be no extra names on the deed. No middlemen. No, just sign here, trust me. I'd sign for it myself, alone if I had to. 2 days later, while I was filling cannoli at the bakery counter, I got a text from an unknown number. Hi Claire. It's Adam. Please call me, it's about your mom. I froze, sticky powdered sugar coating my fingers. Adam was my cousin, more like an older brother when we were kids. He'd moved to Oregon years ago, barely kept in touch except for the occasional Christmas card with his kids' school photos tucked inside. I knew what about your mom usually meant. I wiped my hands on my apron and stepped out the back door, dialed him up with trembling fingers. He answered on the second ring, voice low and weirdly gentle. Hey Claire. You got a minute? The world didn't spin or crumble like I'd expected it to when he spoke. It just felt like a dull thud. A new bruise layered on top of old ones. Mom had been diagnosed with something bad, cancer that had spread too far too fast. She hadn't told me, obviously. Adam said she was in the hospital now. Asking about you. I leaned against the brick wall behind the bakery dumpster, listening to Adam's hesitant words. She wants to see you. She keeps saying she needs to explain. Maybe you should come, Claire. I hung up without promising anything. That night, back on the futon, Jenna pressed a cold beer into my palm without asking. She didn't tell me what to do. Didn't say I should forgive. Didn't say I should go. She just sat beside me while the cheap ceiling fan clattered overhead, and let me lean against her shoulder until my mind quieted down enough to sleep. I didn't know what I was going to do, but I knew this. My life wasn't hers to explain anymore. If I went, it would be on my terms. The next morning I woke up on the futon with my phone clutched in my hand, like I'd been waiting for it to ring again. It hadn't. I lay there listening to the bar's old pipes groan and rattle through the ceiling. I could hear the rumble of early garbage trucks outside, the thump of bass from someone's car rattling by on Main. Life kept moving like it always did, whether I wanted it to or not. Jenna was already gone, her diner uniform draped over the back of the kitchen chair, her note scribbled on a napkin. Coffee's on the counter. Don't burn your mouth. Love, Jay. I sat up, rubbed my face, stared at the coffee. I didn't touch it. Instead, I just kept rereading Adam's text from the night before. She wants to see you. She needs to explain. What the hell did she think she could explain now? Around noon, I finally caved and called Adam back. He picked up on the first ring, like he'd been waiting with the phone in his hand too. Hey, Claire. Hey. A pause. He let the silence sit for a second. I could hear kids yelling in the background, probably his twins, the ones I'd sent $10 birthday cards to when I could still afford birthday cards. So he asked softly. I'll come by, I said. The words felt like chewing glass. Once. To hear whatever she thinks she needs to say. He didn't pretend to be happy. Didn't do that family fixer thing a lot of people do. He just said, okay. I'll text you the hospital and her room number. The hospital was on the other side of town. I couldn't afford a cab, so I rode the bus, pressed against a window smudged with fingerprints and street grime. My reflection stared back at me, dark circles under my eyes, hair pulled back in a messy bun, the same hoodie I'd worn all week. At every red light, my chest clenched like I'd turn around and go home. I didn't. When I stepped through the automatic doors, the smell hit me first, antiseptic and stale cafeteria food and that sharp metallic tang that clings to every hallway. The nurse at the front desk looked up when I gave her my mom's name. She didn't smile. She just nodded, pointed down the corridor. I almost turned back 3 times before I found the room. She looked smaller than I remembered. That was my first thought when I saw her through the doorway. Valerie Peterson, queen of the house, keeper of the keys, now half buried under thin hospital blankets. Her hair, once dyed a perfect bottle blonde every 6 weeks, was limp and gray at the roots. Her cheeks were sunken, eyes dull but sharp when they flicked up and caught mine. Claire Bear. Her voice cracked, dry as old paper. You came. I stepped inside but didn't sit. I didn't know where to put my hands, so I shoved them in the pocket of my hoodie. I stared at the tiled floor, the ugly curtains, the humming Ford drip. Anywhere but her face. You wanted to talk? I said. Flat. Cold. Exactly how I felt. She gave me a weak smile that didn't reach her eyes. I know you hate me. I didn't answer. I wanted you to know I didn't do it to hurt you. I laughed. Sharp, humorless. You stole my house. My life. You think that doesn't hurt? Her hands trembled on top of the blanket. Her wedding band spun loose on her thin finger. I thought I was protecting you. I met her eyes then. She flinched. Good. Protecting me from what? Debt. Taxes. Losing everything to the bank. You're so young, Claire. You don't know how they take things from people. I thought if I could hold it for you just until. I cut her off. Until what? Until you needed the money more than I did. She tried to reach for my hand. I stepped back. The movement seemed to drain the last bit of fight from her. She sank into the pillows, breath rattling like dry leaves. For a second, she looked so small I almost felt something. Not forgiveness. Maybe pity? Maybe? I know you won't forgive me, she whispered. But I hope, one day you'll understand. Understand what? I said. My voice didn't shake. That the one person I trusted most in the world thought I was her backup plan? She didn't answer. Her eyes drifted to the window, pale light leaking through the blinds. Her mouth moved like she wanted to say more, but no words came out. I stood there a moment longer, just breathing in the antiseptic air and the smell of old fear. Then I turned and walked out. She didn't call after me. Adam was waiting in the hall. He stood when he saw me, hands jammed in his pockets. Claire. I shook my head. Don't. It's done. He didn't try to hug me. Didn't pretend this was a healing moment. He just nodded, eyes tired, and said, "You need anything, you call me, okay?" Yeah. I didn't say I would. Back on the bus, I pressed my forehead to the window again. My reflection stared back at me, older this time, sharper around the edges. I could still feel her cold fingers in the air between us, grasping for forgiveness like she'd earned it just by asking. She hadn't. She wouldn't. When I got back to the bar, Jenna was waiting on the fire escape with 2 takeout bags and a bottle of something cheap and terrible. She didn't ask what happened. She just nudged a carton of noodles into my hand and said, "One step closer, huh?" I laughed. Really laughed. Yeah. One step closer. Summer crawled by in sticky weeks of work and heat and cheap takeout. After the hospital visit, I thought maybe I'd feel, I don't know, freed? Lighter? I didn't. If anything, seeing her lying there, small and sunken but still reaching for excuses, cemented something inside me. Like pouring concrete around a soft place so nothing could get in again. I didn't tell Jenna much about what Mom said. I didn't need to. She knew the shape of betrayal well enough to read the gaps. Besides, we had bigger things to talk about, or dream about anyway. By August, my shoebox stash was pushing $2,400. Small, sure, but it felt heavier than the 70 grand I'd once signed away because someone told me it was safer in her hands than mine. I started leaving my bank app open on my phone like a talisman, the same way other people kept good luck charms. Every deposit, every tip, every scraped together $10 bill felt like spitting in the face of what she did to me. Jenna made me promise to let her help. Not with money, she didn't have any more spare than I did, but with ideas. Plans. She was good at plans. She'd done a business certificate online years ago, before the ferrets and the X and the half-finished tattoo shop in her cousin's basement. One Friday night, after her shift at the diner and mine at the bar, we sat on the fire escape with her battered laptop balanced on a milk crate. She opened spreadsheets and showed me listings for cheap foreclosures on the edges of town. Houses with busted roofs, cracked porches, yards more weeds than grass. I didn't care. Every broken window looked like a future that belonged to me. You could flip it, she said, clicking through grainy photos. Live in it while you fix it up, sell it later for profit. Do it again. Build it piece by piece. Yeah, and when I make my millions, I'll buy you a real mattress, I shot back. She grinned. Deal. We talked about all of it. How to get a small loan once I had a decent down payment. How to do the easy repairs ourselves. How to find salvage yards for cheap materials. Every plan felt risky. Every plan felt possible. Then in early September, the ghost call started again. Blocked number. No voicemail this time. Just the buzzing vibration on the bar counter while I was restocking bottles. The first time I ignored it. The second time I sent it straight to voicemail. The third time it called 3 times in a row. I stepped into the back alley, phone clenched so tight my knuckles ached. I answered, not because I wanted to hear her voice, I knew it wasn't her anymore. It was Adam. His voice was raw. The hospital stuff was over. Mom was gone. I didn't ask how. I didn't ask when. I just said thanks and hung up before he could try to wrap me in pity I didn't want. I walked back inside, poured 3 shots of bottom-shelf tequila behind the bar, and knocked them back like medicine. Jenna found me an hour later in the break room, wiping down an already clean counter. She gone? She asked. I nodded. I felt empty, not the shattered kind of empty I'd feared. Just hollow, like a room with no furniture. Good, Jenna said. And that was that. The funeral was 3 days later. I didn't go. Dad texted. I think you should be here. I blocked him next. If that sounds harsh to you, you've never had everything you owned sold out from under you by the woman who made your birthday cakes. Instead, I worked a double at the bakery, then a late close at the bistro. By the time I got home, my hair smelled like fryer oil and sugar, my hands raw from hot dishwater. I collapsed onto Hope the futon and slept harder than I had in weeks. When I woke up, the sun was cutting through the dirty window like a blade. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, counting the cracks in the plaster. She was gone. The door she slammed shut on me was gone with her. No more explaining. No more excuses. No more, Claire Bear, trust me. I spent that Sunday putting together a plan. Jenna sat cross-legged on the futon, passing me half-burnt toast while we made a list. Step 1, keep the shoebox growing. Step 2, find a place cheap enough to fix myself. Step 3, Talk to a credit union for a small loan. Step 4. Never let anyone else sign the deed. Ever. By nightfall, the plan was taped to the cracked mirror over the sink, written in Sharpie on an old pizza box lid. Real classy. Real serious. Jenna looked at me and said, "You know you're gonna make this work. Even if it takes forever." I didn't doubt it. For the first time, I didn't have to doubt it. She wasn't here to rip it away this time. It would be mine or it would be nothing, and I'd take nothing over lies. When I went to bed that night, I didn't think about apologies. Or forgiveness. Or family. I thought about the nails I'd hammer into new drywall. The paint I'd pick myself. The locks I'd change every time I wanted to. No more giving away keys. 3 years later, the futon called Hope was gone. It had been left in a dumpster behind the bar when Jenna and I moved out. The shoebox, though, that stayed. Not the same battered cardboard, but the same idea, a place no one else could touch, a promise made only to myself. I ended up finding a tiny single-story house on the far edge of Springdale, past where the bus lines run and the streetlights flicker more than they glow. It had a roof with missing shingles, a porch half-rotted through, and a yard that looked more like an abandoned lot than anything else. When I signed the papers at the credit union, the notary asked, "Is there anyone else you like on the title?" I laughed so loud I startled her. "No," I said. "Just me." The first night in that house, I didn't have furniture yet. Just a sleeping bag, a camping lantern, and a folding chair I'd pulled from a junk pile 2 streets over. I sat on the floor in the middle of the living room, cracked plaster walls, squeaky floors, no heat yet, and it felt like a palace. I took out the shoebox. This one was newer, sturdier, duct tape around the corners. Inside was the leftover cash I hadn't needed for the down payment, a handful of receipts, and a folded Polaroid of me and Jenna holding cheap plastic cups the night the sale closed. Jenna was still my anchor. She'd gotten a better job, assistant manager at the diner, and was saving to get her tattoo shop dream off the ground again. Some nights she'd crash at my place, same as before, but this time there was an actual bed, an old Craigslist mattress on the floor, but still better than Hope ever was. She'd joke, "We should name this place too. Got any ideas?" I told her, "It's called mine." Fixing the house took every dime, every drop of sweat, and more than a few screaming matches with contractors who thought they could talk circles around me. They couldn't. I'd learned. I'd learned the hard way, the kind that leaves a scar so deep no one can peel it off you. There were nights I'd stand in the middle of the living room, sledgehammer in hand, drywall dust in my hair, and think about that studio. About the keys I never really held. About the money that vanished into someone else's version of security. But mostly, I didn't think about her at all. 2 years into the rebuild, my dad tried to visit. I don't know how he found the address. I guess maybe Adam told him. One night I was scraping old paint off the front door when headlights swung up the driveway. I froze when I saw the rust bucket Ford I'd grown up seeing in our old driveway. He got out, older and smaller than I remembered, shoulders hunched like a man waiting for someone to forgive him before he even asked. "Claire," he said. "Kiddo." I stood on my porch, paint scraper still in my hand. "I heard about the house," he said. "Thought I'd see it. Maybe we could talk." I looked at him, really looked at him. The same man who'd slipped 20s in my hand but never said no when it really counted. The man who turned his eyes to the kitchen floor while my life got sold from under me. There was nothing left to say. So I did the only thing I knew how to do now. I stepped back, shut the screen door, and locked it. I didn't slam it. I didn't yell. Just turned the deadbolt with calm hands and watched him stand there for a minute longer, hat in his hands, that same lost look on his face, before he shuffled back to his truck and drove away. Inside, I stood in my kitchen. The walls were still half-primed. The faucet dripped. The light above the sink flickered when the fridge kicked on. Perfect. I pulled out my shoebox and opened it, just to see the next plan tucked inside, sketches of a small rental unit I'd build out back, a tiny garden I'd plant where the weeds used to choke the fence. Maybe someday I'd flip this place and buy a bigger one. Maybe I wouldn't. Maybe I'd die in this crooked little house with my name carved into every wall stud. Mine. Sometimes people say forgiveness is the only way to move on. Maybe that's true for some. But for me, moving on was better than forgiving. Better than pretending some half-baked apology would glue my bones back together. Forgiveness didn't buy these walls. Forgiveness didn't swing the hammer or pay the plumber or sign the deed. I did that. The last thing I did that night was walk to the front door, run my hand over the fresh coat of paint, and lock it twice, once for the world, and once for her memory. When I crawled into my bed, no longer on a floor, no longer under someone else's roof, I fell asleep knowing exactly whose name was on every inch of this crooked, perfect, tiny kingdom. And this time, no one was taking it away.